data is what drives the world today. As long as you are existing on planet Earth, you have a form of data associated with your existence. Your name is your personal data. Your mobile number is your personal data. Here in Nigeria, we have something called the National Identity Number. That is your personal data. Your phone number is attached to so many things. Your phone number is attached to your national identity number. Your phone number, if you're an employer, is attached to your business. As an employee, your phone number is attached to your profile with your employers. So it is very important for us as humans today to take these things seriously, because data is currently what organizations use to drive policies, to drive businesses, and to make sure that they don't flop when they are making those decisions. So there's something called data-driven models. These are models that organizations use to probably push new business fronts, or to try to make try to make decisions about probably a new business idea or a new business model that they're trying to deploy. So it's very important for us as humans today to take our data seriously. And in commemoration of the Data Privacy Day, I'm glad that Commercial came up with this webinar, where we are going to be talking about data privacy and other data-related information. So for this webinar, straight to the point, we're going to be talking about data privacy. Next, we're going to be looking at personal data. We're also going to be considering some examples of personal data. We're going to talk about how to protect our personal data. And then in case your personal data is compromised, we're going to be looking at some actions, some things you can do to make sure that you are not totally off balance, and you'll be able to recover some of the things that could possibly be stolen from you due to the loss of data. And then the last part, which I call discussions, is an opportunity for everyone on the call to share their experiences in one way or the other on how their experience has been. I mean, anywhere you are in the part of the world, on your personal data, how you use it, how you manage it, or probably an experience that you've had about losing your data, maybe through the recent data leak from Facebook or Yahoo, or as the case may be, maybe some VPN services that were recently affected to data leakage. So talking about data privacy, this is often known as information privacy. You can call it information privacy, and it is a subset of data protection that focuses on the proper handling of data while ensuring that you adhere to the data protection standards. There are different data protection standards that governs how organizations manage collection, the usage, and the sharing of data within the organization or beyond the organization. So it's data privacy concerns how data should be acquired, how it should be stored, and how it should be managed, and how the organizations that collect this data, that store this data, how they can share it with third parties, and as well as how they can adhere to existing privacy regulations such as the Consumer Privacy Act or the GDPR, that's the General Data Protection Regulation. So for a protected data to be usable, it has to meet certain criteria. So that's when we talk about data security, which creates a data protection area in conjunction with data privacy. So ensure that the data that organizations gather or that they are in possession of is safe to use and adheres with the required standard for that data usage. I'm going to quickly go. If you have any questions, you can please drop them in the chat. I'll be checking, and you can also put them in the question and answer area. All right. So some of the things. Sorry, please. Some of the items that we need to consider when talking about data protection, from the security point of view, something that is called encryption. Encryption is a process of converting plain text to ciphertext. That means, for example, I have my name written down in plain words, alphabets that everybody can read and understand. Uh, if my name is encrypted, you won't see it in the form of normal alphabets that we all know. It would be a combination of numbers, alphabets that is much more longer than what you can see naturally if you're saying my name, Ifeoluwa. I'm not going to go into so much details about that because it's some of those technical things. So everyone on this call can at least have a basic understanding of what these things mean. So whereas when you talk about encryption, there's another thing called decryption. So after doing all the uh, conversion process, before the other entity can see it, it has to be decrypted. So, and there are also the symmetric and the asymmetric methods of encryption and decryption that can be used to support this wide range of security solutions to ensure that data is protected and confidentiality and integrity is maintained for the data. Another thing to talk about is network security. Now, different organizations, we have our firewalls, we have our routers that has access list configured on them. And these are security measures taken on the network side to ensure that users within the corporate network or within the organization are protected from any form of attack coming from an external source. So firewalls, proxies, they are all important, and you must not overlook the need for endpoint security as well. Because if I'm protecting my environment or users within my corporate network from having access to certain websites or from certain IP addresses to have access to my corporate network, I also need to ensure that users within the organization do not have applications that could easily circumvent this process installed on their PC. That's why we need to ensure that endpoint security on user devices is also in place so that we'll be able to ensure that on the part of network security, everything is covered and the entire estate is protected. So the endpoint security is a concept that each individual device must maintain local security, whether or not it's network or telecommunications channel. They also ensure that security is provided on that local device or local machine. So next thing to talk about on the security side of things is access control. So for access control, we need to ensure that the security of a system, to ensure that a system is secure, you need to allow users within that network to access only authorized objects. Authorized objects could be in form of documents, could be in form of software files or setup files, could be in form of different things depending on the type of organization where you work. So access control ensures that users or subjects can only have access to what they are meant to have access to. So it limits the access of users to an object that they should have access to. So the access rule states and which objects are valid for each subject is what access control does. So in that state, this object, say my phone, I can only have access to my phone if it is my phone. So it's only valid for me, it's only my own if it's my phone. That's what they state. So it means that for every user within an organization, you can't just open any file or any folder that's probably stored on a shared storage server or a cloud server, as the case may be, within the organization without having authorized access to it. So there are a wide range of options for access controls, and Some are discretionary, some are role-based, some are mandatory. So depending on how the organization deems it fit for you to have access to certain resources, then your access is granted. So another thing is activity monitoring. Activity monitoring also in one way or the other has to do with how people have access to certain resources on the network without denying the fact that they actually have access to those things. So it means that if you are accessing a particular resource on the network, whatever you are doing is being tracked or is being logged, as it's called. And at that point, it means if any changes or if any change or changes are made on certain resources on the network, the administrator or the people in charge or the owner of that particular resource knows who to talk to understand why the change was made and how it was made. So that if anything goes wrong, it could easily be traceable and resolved. So breach response talks about how, as an organization, you respond to maybe a security breach that has happened within the organization. So there has to be an incident response team in place to ensure that in case of any security breach within the organization, they have a ready-made plan. So the breach response plan is built into the construction or the setup of the organization infrastructure. So you know that, okay, my backup files or my backup servers are in this location. If anything happens to my production environment, I know I can easily fail over to my backup sites. And so that should be part of a breach response to any data, so any attack on your estate. So another thing is DLP, which is called data loss prevention. It talks about how to prevent data from leaving your network or even leaving a computer system. There are different software, proprietary or non-proprietary software that are used to ensure that this is checked. You could have access to USB ports on your laptop blocked or restricted for certain users within the organization for which data has to be protected. CASB is a cloud access security broker, which is a software placed logically between users and the cloud-based resources. So it can be on-premise and can be in the cloud. And anyone that has access to the cloud goes through that CASB software and it monitors all the activities and ensures that it enforces administrator-defined policies, security policies. That means if you are trying to access it, so let's say in a hybrid environment, that means you have an on-premise server and you're also using the cloud services. A CASB is deployed to ensure that any resource you're trying to access in the cloud is checked against the security policies that have been set or defined by the administrator to ensure that you do not do anything that negates the standard policies of the organization regarding data security and data protection. So that's about the security side of things. So on the privacy side of things, we'll talk about discovery and classification. We'll talk about DSARs. We'll talk about content. We'll talk about third-party management, data removal, and then the policies. For DSARs, it's called data subject access request. The request that is addressed to organizations, and it ensures that individuals have right to access information about personal data the organization is processing about them. So take, for instance, Commercial Limited is processing personal data about me. Using this, through this, I could write to the organization requesting for information about what they are doing or what they are currently using my data for, in order for me to be aware and verify the lawfulness of processing of my data that is currently ongoing with them. So this is something that is very important that we bear in mind. I'm really not sure if this is in place in Nigeria, but of course, these are things that as individuals or as organizations, we should be aware of, so that if anything comes up and you receive a letter from individuals that you have their data and they'd like to know what you're using their data for, you should know that to an extent it's within their rights to request for such information. So consent. This means that processing personal data generally is prohibited unless it is expressly allowed by law. So you can't just have my personal data with you and be using it for all sorts, except it is allowed by the law. So as an individual that I am, as an individual, not representing an organization, the organization I work for, or the organization that I partner with, as an individual, I do not have the right to hold personal information or personal data of people I know, even my family members, and using them without their consent. So this is very important for us as individuals to know that anything you do with people's personal data without their consent, excuse me, is against the laws. That is against the laws, is not right, and is not within their consent, is a crime. So for protected data to be usable, for protected usable data, it has to ensure that all the things we have in this diagram here, all these things are put into consideration and are well adhered to before you can say, oh yeah, I am using this data the right way, or I'm processing or using this data according to the laws or according to the policies laid down by governing bodies or laid down by the organizations that manage this data. So next, we are going to be talking about the consequences of non-compliance. I'm just trying to make it as short as possible so you don't get bored with all the data and the information that comes with it, because data itself is big and processing data is a whole lot. So I'm quickly going to be talking about, I'm quickly going to be talking about the consequences of non-compliance to some of these policies that have been laid down by organizations for the use of data. So it's divided into two from what you can see on the screen. I divided it into two, and there is the legal consequence and a business consequence. From the legal side of things, you have fines and penalties, you have lawsuits, you have regulatory scrutiny, you have imprisonment. For all those things, I believe we all know what it means. When you're asked to pay a fine, it means that a regulatory body governing privacy standards can impose a fine on you if you are found not worthy for compliance, if you are not using data the right way, or you are not processing data the right way. So it is important for organizations to make sure that they know these policies, they know they know what is required of the regulatory bodies governing privacy standards with respect to the use of data, and adhere strictly to these policies, because they already have different types of fines and penalties that will be imposed on. It's already laid down. It's laid down rule and standard from these regulatory bodies. So it is important for organizations to make sure that they know what these regulatory bodies cover, and they align with those rules and regulations. Talking about lawsuits, when there's a data breach due to non-compliance, the repercussions aren't just limited to just fines and penalties. Data breach affects stakeholders, including customers, employees, vendors, or anybody that is in one way or the other legally or illegally associated with an organization. So there's every chance that the affected parties might decide to take legal actions in form of lawsuits against the organization for not using their data properly, or for using their data for what was not stated in their terms and conditions while they were signing up for those services. We can remember the case of Facebook. There was a lawsuit against Facebook recently that has to do with the use of people residing in the United States, their data that has to do with using their data for carrying out different form of advertisement, targeted ads, and all of that, that was against what they signed up for. So this led to a lawsuit, and it was being heard by the parliament. So these are things that organizations too should pay attention to, so that they won't fall victim of these things. So another thing that we'll talk about is regulatory scrutiny. So recovering from a security breach, if you're not compliant and then you get breached, that means you were hacked, or somehow there was data leakage from maybe a disgruntled employee within the organization, and then it was used by a competing firm, or it was used against you as an organization. Covering from this because of non-compliance is not always easy. It's never been easy. So even after paying the fines, after paying the penalties, the business, I mean, that organization will be subjected to constant checks to ensure that they are not breaching those laws again. So this comes with costly regulatory audits that could go on for years until they ensure that the organization is meeting certain data security or data policy standards. Also, when there's a lawsuit, is either you get freed or you get jailed. So it's possible for maybe individuals or business owners to get imprisoned for breaching some of these regulatory standards. And we know that would definitely affect anybody that in one way or the other, that's called having criminal records. And, it affects executives and directors, and it could stop them from being able to continue the business and push forward in their dealings. So it's very important for organizations to ensure that they comply to the rules and regulations guiding the use of data and the privacy of personal user data. So for the business consequences, we have business disruption. If data is leaked and people are aware about a data leakage, one, if I'm aware that probably a company has been breached and probably I had plans of signing up with the organization to do one thing or the other, my interest will be lost, and I'm definitely not going to push through with that interest. So from my own side, they are losing a customer. I mean, from the organization perspective, they are losing customers, and their business is being disrupted, because it means that some things that they need to pay attention to, they will not be able to pay attention to those things again, because they're now chasing after legal battles and after fines and penalties, lawsuits, regulatory scrutiny, and all of that. So it affects the business, and it also causes revenue loss. As in the case of data breach, we've heard about organizations that were hacked, their data was encrypted by a threat actor, and they have been requested to pay for the recovery of their files, which is being called ransomware, as the case is. These things happen, and they're still happening. So if an organization is paying an unbudgeted amount for the recovery of data that was lost to a threat actor, that's a total revenue loss. And apart from that, it will be very difficult to maintain a business when you have customers that have trusted you with their data, and they keep trusting you with their data, get to know that the organization has been breached. They will lose the trust in you, and they would want to move their business away from you. And so when that happens, of course, you are running at loss. And I hope that organizations buckle up these days and try taking steps and actions to ensure that they avert this risk of non-compliance and do the right things to ensure that they are not breached and their data is secure. So another thing that could happen is security breaches. Like I explained earlier, it's very possible that organizations are breached, and one of the things that threat actors, one of the things that they target is data. encrypt the data or exfiltrate the data to their own storage and threaten to release the data. Of course, if they release the data, everyone has it and it becomes public. Something that shouldn't be public becomes public. Some things that could actually be exfiltrated from the server of an organization to a threat actor could be the user login credentials, which is the personal data. It could be the credit card information. I mean, it could be the bank account details of people that probably shop with you. So these are things that organizations should ensure that they look out for so that they don't fall victim of the business consequences of non-compliance to data storage and usage. So damaged brand reputation is also something that I mentioned earlier about the case of Facebook using data inappropriately. It actually made lots of users to probably deactivate their Facebook accounts or stop using it entirely, remove their data from Facebook. And there was a lot of backlash on Facebook due to that incident. So people tend to lose trust in organizations that misuse or misappropriate their data. So their brand is always at stake. And with that, I'll be talking now about personal data. I just mentioned briefly that your identity, your name, your phone numbers, your credit card number, some other things are part of your personal data. So let me just go straight now to personal data.